Right, so we're going to cover some questions on estate agency and go through some of these advice videos. Now, one of the things, or there's a couple of questions here that I want to cover, and I want to explain firstly where these questions have come from. So I had a valuation about 2 weeks ago now, and I met a couple quite close to where I live, but I met them, had a good conversation with them, valued their home, etc. What I found interesting was the questions that she was asking me, because the questions she was asking me they're incredibly thorough, but it was not the normal questions you get asked on the valuation, which I think is a good thing, because it told me immediately she'd done her research. So it felt to me like she knew the answers before I'd answered them, but she wanted to see what my answer was to the question. So it was quite a different type of valuation than what I experienced the vast majority of the time. And I explained to her that we're doing these videos and what we kind of want to cover in this, and we want to deliver some level of value to people that are watching them. And I asked her what sort of questions, because to me, she felt like she had a much deeper understanding on what she needed to know, rather than just making assumptions. So I asked her what sort of questions would she have liked answered before she started this process, so she can get an understanding or get a head start, so to speak. So she's messaged me over some questions, and they're quite good, but what we'll do is we'll go through one of them at a time and kind of answer them. So the first one is, how do you choose the right estate agent? There is a lot of stigma around estate agents, so how do you know who to choose that is trustworthy and won't lie for the sake of the sale?
It's a good question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, what comes to mind for me immediately is two things. Deliver on some value whilst you're there. So you want to give them something they can take away, something they would be able to use, whoever they speak to. If they're speaking to another agency, that's some useful information they can take with them that's not just personal to you. I think that shows some open and honesty. It's giving something away where it's not under the promise that only if you come with me you'll get this is just for you, and that shows some clarity, some honesty there. And then when it comes to the actual price itself, I suppose that's going to come with information back. You should be providing a lot of information for people to make a decision from. So with the factor of those two things, delivering value and information, I think that you can probably break through any sort of mistrust there.
I think the problem is she mentioned the stigma for estate agents, and estate agents have been hated for a long time now. Sorry, I just pressed the phone on my thing there. Estate agents have been hated for a long time now, and I think because of the false promises, because of we'll be able to get you this amount and they don't do it, because of the bad habits that come within the industry, small little lies through to quite big catastrophic ones that cost people thousands of pounds. It's not something that's happened overnight. It's taken decades of bad behaviour and negativity to cause that view on estate agents, and it's going to take decades to unpick that. But not all estate agents are like that. There are still them guys around there, and it is going to be very hard to tell the ones that are good from the ones that are bad, because really the opportunity you've got to judge that person is on the valuation.
Yeah. And
that valuation, you've invited them into your home to do that valuation. They are in front of you right now. They're giving their pitch, if you like. And I think what a lot of people maybe don't fully understand is that pitch is massively rehearsed. Like they've gone over that 1,000 times minimum, and they've gone through it in the office. They've trained for it. They've gone through training sessions, endless hours of training to get to that point, endless live training of going to different valuations. It is going to be the best version of that agent you will ever see, because they've practiced it so many times. So judging them on that moment, it is going to be really easy to make the wrong decision, because you are seeing the best of everyone. But when you look at the overall package, that's where you can start seeing the cracks appear. And it could be about, the way the call was handled when you initially booked the valuation. It could be, the build up to the valuation. It could be the valuation themselves, or how much interest they've shown in the property. It could be how much interest they've shown in your scenario and what you want to do moving forward. It could be the way they follow up. If they say, I won't chase you, and then chase you. If they hound you, that's often a sign that you've got someone chasing a target rather than trying to help you make the right decision for you. Because I do think that's an important thing, is that the agents that do a valuation and then immediately start chasing quite soon after. I mean, we know one locally within a couple of hours, but usually within a couple of days, they're already chasing, have you made a decision? Would you like to go with us? And that kind of thing. They are the types of people that are chasing targets. they're not offering, and you mentioned value, they're not offering anything of value to that seller to help them make the right decision for them, whether it be that agent or not. And I think that is a good point in seeing a difference. The false promises, you're not really going to see them or see any. You're not really going to see through any of their promises until you give them the opportunity of giving them a contract. And by that point, sometimes it's too late. So you kind of want to be scrutinising everything that they say. And you mentioned this when we saw this the other day about challenging the stuff that the agent gives you. So when they give you a response to a question, challenge that question to get a deeper understanding of where that's come from, because they will just chuck figures out there and chuck facts out there, and it's who are you to dispute that. And I think one of the things, and in fact it was this client that pulled it up, is the infamous Rightmove pie chart.
Yeah.
And like I personally hate them. I do hate them. But for a client, when you see these pie charts, you can, any agency, even the worst performing ones, if you tinker with the criteria, or if you adjust the parameters in which that pie chart is created by, you can make yourself look really good, but equally you can make yourself look really bad. So like in this scenario, one of the agents were kind of putting a pie chart out there, made it look like they were selling loads and we were selling very little. And when I said loads, we're talking 30 plus properties within a close proximity to that property, and we'd sold only a small number. I think it was like 14 or 15. And when I looked at our data, because we track everything, so I looked at what we sold, and it wasn't a reflection of them figures. So I tinkered with the evidence. I made it look like they sold 6 and we'd sold 1, and that clearly wasn't the case. They'd sold way more than 6, we'd sold way more than 1. But it just shown that you can tinker that evidence to suit the narrative that you want to put across to the owner. And I think the fact you can do that is wrong. But secondly, when you're putting that in front of homeowners, how are they meant to know whether that's been tinkered with or not? It's impossible. So unless you can verify the source through a neutral way, you've got to kind of discount a lot of what you're promised and what you're told, I think.
I think that's where it becomes value. So for the honest and the trustworthy thing, I think for me, when I go into anyone's living room, my first thought before I walk through the door is, how can I deliver something of value to them? I don't expect you never know what to expect from a valuation meeting, of course. And people are on different paths on the journey. Some are very early, some are just working out their plans with mortgages and things like that, and some are ready to go. So I don't know what position that person necessarily is always in, or how that might change. It can develop literally on a meeting sometimes, that it could be like, oh, it's a long-term plan, it becomes a very short-term plan in a matter of talking to them. But the thing that I go in with, without doubt, is how can I deliver on value? And I think that when you break that down, is okay, you can produce all the pie charts, you can do all the sales pitch, but what is actually valuable? What content are you giving them that's actually useful for them to take away? Because a pie chart saying I've sold 20 locally does not mean that or listed 20 locally or sold 20 locally, doesn't show the full reflection. They could have had 60 on the market and only sold 20 of them. They could have, and all of these things are, get away from the flashy stuff. What is the value bit? What is the bit?
And that's slightly deceiving, because on these pie charts you can't put listed and sold. So you could do listed, you've listed loads, but how many of them have actually sold? Or you've sold loads, but how many of them have you actually listed? Because if you're listing 100 properties and only selling 50 of them, or you've sold 25 properties but you've listed 75, you're not necessarily a good agent. It's just more a case of, if you throw enough mud at a wall, a certain amount will stick. So you put enough properties on the market, a certain amount will sell by default. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good agent, it just means that you're a numbers agent. And the problems with the numbers agents, when you start getting big and you start focusing on getting as many properties on as you can, is something has to give somewhere, because the company, that they can't grow. There's not the profit in a estate agency to grow massively with the amount of properties you're taking on the market. There's always going to be a slight misbalance there, especially if when you're going to the cheaper fee agents I'm kind of referring to. When you start going low on the fee and high on the quantity, something's got to give somewhere, and that thing that always gives is always service, and it is always the quality of that service is the first thing to go. So then you've got to look at, okay, well, these guys are saying they sold the most, but have they really got the infrastructure to be dealing with that level of numbers? And am I actually going to get the level of service I want? One of the interesting questions I got asked on the valuation yesterday was, how long have I worked for the company? Now, obviously, it's quite interesting for me because it's since day one. Company, But I thought it was quite a valid point, and I asked her why she asked that question, and she said to me it was because when she had the previous agent round, she asked him how long he worked for the company, and he said 3 months. So she said, where did you work before that? The company worked before that, how long was you there for? And he said 6 months. And she said, what about before that? And he said, a year. And she said, what worried her is that this guy was hopscotching through agencies. Now, his excuse was, I just haven't found the agency that I'm comfortable with, that I'm happy at. And that there could be an element of truth there, but I think in this type of role, it's more likely that there's something not right there, and it could be that this individual's not meeting their targets, or they're over-promising, they could be getting complaints. It could be so many different things there. Is it worth taking the risk? Not really. If someone's been at a company for a long period of time, that shows you they're happy with where they are. It shows they're performing well because the company's keeping them on. They don't want to leave the company doesn't want to kick them out. That means that relationship is working quite well, so they've got to be doing something right. And generally speaking, that means that they're going to be bringing in some level of income for that company to warrant them being there. So that is everything that's positive, I feel, for a seller.
Yeah.
Okay, there could be the scenario where someone's worked for a company for a short period of time. They may have just started there and only been there a few months. That's fine. I'm not saying discount that completely. But if they were at the place beforehand for, say, 2 years and then they're only at this place for 2 months, that's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
But if you're hopscotching between companies, and I see it, there's certain faces that I see in Rayleigh, they've been around for, a couple of them decades. One of them I can think off the top of my head works at one, then 2, 3, 4, 5. She's worked at 5 companies in the last 8 years. And you think, like, that's a lot of estate agents in 8 years.
It is both that. I think that although, because obviously the way that we work is a bit different, we're one-on-one with our clients, so I guess that there's an element where it feels like you get your own sort of mini business working for you. But there is the culture of the place, because it only takes the culture of a business to go wrong, and you get in one day and there's a bad attitude in the office, everyone's in a bad mood. That's going to reflect your work. There's no way of avoiding it. And what team around you can support you through that sort of thing. So I think, it's you're meeting the individual, but the company is really the foundation of that individual for a lot of the work they do and what effort they're likely to put in. And I think that's the thing, from our perspective, is that there's, being the self-employed role where you don't get paid until you sell, there is no advantage to being dishonest. There's no advantage to misleading someone, because all it does is waste your time. And the thing is that every minute that we work is valuable. We're not getting paid for it until we sell a property. So it has to be focused on something of value and something that's going to deliver a result. Otherwise, it's all just wasted. If I got a client and told them their property is £100,000 more than it actually is, all I'm going to do is waste my time, annoy that client, and not get a recommendation. And there's no advantage to me or the business for that.
But if you were employed, you'd still be getting a basic wage. Even if that property would come on and sit there, and they're never going to sell at £100,000 more, but you're still getting your wage at the end of the day. So the employed agent, there is always that risk with the employed agent that you're not quite going to, you're going to massively lower that risk with self-employed, because if they don't sell that, they're not being paid, as simple as that. They're not getting a wage, they haven't got a basic, they haven't got know that the bills are covered at the end of the month because they've got something coming in there.
Well, I guess some companies will target them on the listing rather than the sale part, right? So that's going to be the thing. So to get you on board will give me an extra 50 quid commission that week or whatever it might be. Where for me, I don't get commission or getting paid, until I sell. I don't get on commission as such. Don't get paid until I sell a property. So, there's no advantage for me misleading someone, because all it does is potentially waste time, and and that can deliver, I suppose, a certain level of trustworthiness. In purely in the fact is that and sometimes we've had it. A client's wanted us to list for far more than a property's worth, and sometimes you've got to decide that you've got to walk away from it, because that is not something that you can spend your energy on. Where other companies would see that as a win. For us, or for me personally, I'm not talking about you. I don't know, but for me, that's not a win. That's and I've done those things. I've accepted. In my early days, I accepted people that wanted to go for a bit more, but all it does is that bite me in the bum. So you got to reverse that back and go, where's the value? Yeah,
I think when I look at companies I've worked for before I started Nest, so I look at all the companies I worked for, every single one of them always targeted on instructions, never targeted on sales. So you're encouraged to get them on the market, and I think that breeds bad behaviour, like door knocking, like hounding on the phone, like false promises, because you are just purely, and it is a survival thing, from the agent's perspective, they've got to get paid at the end of the day, and if they're targeted, if they don't meet them targets, they're going to lose their job. So they have to tell you what you need to hear to get you on the market, because that's how they're going to feed their family. Yeah. So there is a survival aspect there, and that unfortunately does leave homeowners a little bit open to that. And I think homeowners, they do have to be vigilant as to what's the risk here, and weigh up that risk of what this agent is saying in front of them, and how much of this can they actually demonstrate but also looking at things like reviews and stuff like that and seeing how genuine they are, because you see repetitiveness there. You see things like, particularly we used to see this a lot with Facebook reviews, where you used to get like friends and family leave a review, and you find like they've got the same surname as the person that you've had round to your living room. That's a bit of a dodgy one. You've got to be careful. So I think that there's a lot of things that you could do in regards to trying to protect yourself, but I think we've mentioned it a few times about value. So let's add a bit of value to this. Let's give one tip for whoever's watching this. Let's give them one tip on how they could lower the risk for them in picking someone that's going to be untruthful and just looking to get a sale. What would your one tip be?
So I think it's going to be, for my one would be evidence on the price. So when you come to valuation, evidence that almost as close to indisputable as possible. And for that agent to support that with a 0-week contract as well. Because I think that shows not only are they telling you the right price, that if they've told you it wrong and they're not going to deliver on the value, you get to walk away at any point whenever you decide they're not living up to their promise.
Was a typical agent, I can sell this in 2 weeks, but I need an 8-week contract.
Right.
Yeah.
What's your one tip?
So my tip would be, it would be the buyers. Ask them how many buyers they've got on their books. And it is one of the questions that I do like, because my answer is always the same on every single valuation, and it's 0. I've got none. And the reason I say that, and I always explain to homeowners, is saying that I'm going to tell you I've got none. Have I got buyers on my books? Absolutely. Are they looking for a 3-bed property like yours? There are some on there, yes. Are they going to want to buy this property? I cannot tell you, because I need to go back and talk to them. I've only just seen your property. This is the first time I've been in here. The first time I've seen your kitchen, first time I've seen your bathroom, first time I've seen your lounge. I've not known about this property until I'm here right now. We don't know about pricing until I'm here right now. And everyone has a budget, so I need to know what price you're looking to sell it at and what you've got. And then I can go back and speak to these people, and then I'll be able to give you a number as to how many people are interested at that point. I'm only going to do that when you instruct me to sell your property, for starters, because that is part of the job. But secondly, I'm not going to sit here and commit to you that I have buyers that are going to want to buy this property and make false promises when there is no evidence to say that there is. And I've seen this before, and I've come across this time and time again in my career, where buyers, agents will go in and say, I can think of 5 people that want to buy this tomorrow. I've easily got 5 people. I've got people queuing up for this. And it's kind of like, you're lying. You're lying. Stop lying. Stop churning out the rubbish, because sellers do believe it because they want to believe it. But there's no evidence for that. And logically, how are they going to know that? Unless they've seen that property before, they're not going to know. And when I go back to that office and I ring these buyers, you can guarantee every single one of them is going to say the same thing when I say, oh, I've just got this free bed that's come up. Would you like to go and have a look at it? Every single one would immediately respond with, have you got any pictures? So...
yeah, because you're walking into, everyone's going to expect a certain level. And I had this with a buyer the other day, not a client of mine, but someone that wanted to purchase it. And they said, I'm going on the market, and the agent's already come round. They're the biggest in the area, and they've got buyers waiting for it. And 2 months later, she calls back and says, I've had to drop 50 grand, and we only had 6 people through the door. So it was, that immediate over-promise. And the fact that they gave them the confidence, they may be a well-known name in the town, and that's the problem with trying to see through it, is to say, well, look, of course they're a big agent. Why would they not have buyers? Well, everyone's got buyers on their books. Everyone that's sold a property, you're going to have a list of them. We've all got them. You're absolutely right. As soon as you start speaking to them, everyone has the same thing. What does it look like? Is the size of the room? All those sorts of normal questions that people have. If I'm about to spend the best part of toward $500,000, especially in properties around here, what does it have? Because you're not going to just go and look at things that you don't know. So that's it just goes to show.
Just don't employ liars.
Yeah.
Simple as. Right.